Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Principal Soup. I'm Jamal Crook.
Zach Schottler.
And Zach, do you trust me?
Absolutely. We're here on this podcast together and you're editing
Yeah.
it. So I trust you not to make me look bad.
Let me ask you something. What do you trust me with?
Well, I've been knowing you for about 5 years and
Hmm.
I have you come and work at our school. I
Hmm.
have you speak to my administrators privately and coach them privately. So
Hmm.
I trust you with my professional credibility, which is a pretty high
Hmm.
bar.
Wow. Likewise. I trust you. I trust you to be around my family. I trust you to do what you say that you're going to do. Listen, I trust you to be on time for everything.
Yeah, Jamal and I have some pretty funny stories. Well, funny for him, not as funny for me that we spoke at a professional conference, and if I say that I want to leave for the conference at a specific time, and you say, Jamal, hey, let me grab a cup of coffee first, how does my body language change?
Oh, it gets real stiff. So just for context, so we're going to this, we're going to present. What was it? What was the name of the conference? The
Capital
Ohio.
Conference in Columbus.
What does it say it again?
Capital Conference in Columbus.
Capital Conference in Columbus. And so me, like I view time a little bit differently than Zach does, apparently. So he says we're leaving the room at this time. All right, cool. We're leaving our rooms at this time. So but like we got to get there by this time. So I'm still ironing stuff, and I'm gonna grab a cup of coffee real quick. I'll meet you down, at the car. And I learned about you that day that like when it comes to like hitting your zones, and I have this weird thing where I can sense emotion, right? So I look over at you, I was like, what I forgot what I said, but I mentioned something to the effect of like I get it. I'm gonna be on time moving forward. But I know now with dealing with you and anything that we do, if we say 9:15, we need 9:15. I need to be ready. Or or it could, I know for you, that could erode trust over time if I'm consistently not on time for things because that's important to you. So today we're talking about how number one, we're talking about trust and how it takes time. And then the role of transparency is what we're talking about now, and the consistency in our behavior and also our relationships, from our peers, and also our relationships with the people that we lead as well. So for you, what's the foundation of every successful relationship?
From friendships when you're a kid, um, from your marriage, with your wife, to um, what organization you choose to associate with. It's trust. It's,
Mm-hmm.
does that person do what they say they're going to do, and do their actions and words match? And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people that can talk a good game. There's very few people that can talk the game and walk the game, and walking the game is much more important. Um, if we look at our lives, our circle of friends, it shrinks, the older that we get. And a lot of that's due to time constraints, but a lot of it's, due to trust.
Right.
Do I trust that person? And
Right.
Simon Sinek has a really good, and you can check this out on YouTube. He creates a trust versus performance equation, and he talks to Navy SEALs, and everybody wants that person on their team that's a high performer and high trust.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he uses the phrase like, I trust you with my life, but can I trust you with my wife? And,
Ooh.
yeah. So
No.
yeah, yeah. So everybody wants someone
Yeah.
who's a high performer that has a high level of trust. But
Yeah.
Cynic working with the Navy SEALs, what he found is that if you have to pick between the two, You want somebody that has a high level of trust that might be a middle performer or even a low performer, as opposed to somebody that is a great performer on this side of the equation, but has low trust, meaning that you couldn't trust them with your life. Because those type of people are toxic. And I know you and I are both sports guys, so we think about some of the athletes that are immensely talented, but
Mhm.
they don't show up for practice, or they only give effort on 2/3 of the plays, or when the game's over, they throw their quarterback under the bus. Those folks are great performers, but in
Mhm.
that locker room, there's a very low level of trust. And what happens to those teams invariably, they implode internally. And
Right.
so we want to have people on our team that high trust and high performers. But if you have to pick, because nobody's perfect, always take the person of high trust, even if they are a middle of the road performer.
Which is so important because I talk about to my staff a lot collective efficacy. And just to that point, and this is something that I probably didn't realize before you said what you just said, was I intentionally look for people that are gonna be consistent in showing up to the things that might not that don't have to do with performance. Because I fundamentally believe that if I'd rather take a, a group of mediocre or average people, I'm saying average people, and work on their performance because they have high trust than to take the high performers who have that I can't trust to be on time or do the little things consistently, because that group of average people together will the sum of their talents will be greater than the individual, right? So for me, what you just said, like it was an unconscious thing, but I intentionally look for employees that are really good at our core values, or that model them, doing all the work, doing the right things for the right reasons, being coachable, being consistent, and being trustworthy. I look for that more so than I look for their performance, because I know that I can build their performance and we can grow together and we'll get better because that's a skill. But the thing that you can't coach sometimes is having your yeses be your yeses and your no's be your no's, and being consistent in your
Bingo.
actions as it relates to the things that you say and the things that you do when you say them. I tell people all the time on my staff, do not believe anything that I say until you see me do it. Believe my actions. So if I'm telling you something, there's going to be actions with it. So I've learned to, if I can't pull something off or if I can't do it, I'm gonna be transparent with you. Like I don't know that I'm able to do that, but I'll try. Or yes, I can do that, or we will do this. And then there's massive action that takes place because I tell people to look at what I do as opposed to what I say.
Yeah, we're not miracle workers as leaders or coaches. We could take somebody that has the want to and develop those skills. I've not met anybody that can coach trustworthiness by the time someone's an adult. I've not. If you know of anybody, Jamal, let me know. I've never hired somebody that when they came on board, we noticed their trust issues and have been able to coach them out of those violations of trust.
No, like I've never seen it either. So then, how do you build trust?
Well, I, I think you build trust over time by
Mhm.
it's micro and it's not even conscious. So think back to your relationship with Cynthia. Did you put her through intentional trust hurdles to jump over, or did it just kind of happen over time? Like, hey, we'll meet for dinner at 6 o'clock, and she showed up.
Yeah.
She,
Listen, Cynthia called me black and ashy and would not let me hold her books. So it took me 2 years to get her to let me hold her books, let alone get anything else from her. So there was a lot of trust that I was putting into that bank account for 2 years, just trying to walk her to class, and she would walk real fast. But to your point, absolutely.
yeah, I mean, all relationships have similar characteristics. Okay, so if you think of your best friend in middle school,
Hmm.
the person that you would know would have your back in a fight, did
Hmm.
you specifically ask them questions to see if you trusted them? No. Their actions over time allowed you to know that you could trust them, and conversely. When you met your wife for the first time, over the course of time, that trust built itself. So you can't force trust, you can't rush trust. It's actions over time. When I met you, Jamal, over 5 years ago, it was just happenstance through our mutual connection with Don Wettrick. And
Hmm.
we picked up the phone, we called each other, we started doing some professional development activities together. There was never a conversation between you and I where we said, "Hey, do you trust me?"
Oh,
It,
today is the first time.
yeah, it just is. Hey, you want to do this professional development in Columbus? Yes. Um, Meet you on the plane. Um, these things just happen organically. So if you want somebody to trust you, you have to be authentic. You need to do what you say you're going to do, and then it happens over time. And a lot of the things that we talk about in leadership, they sound fantastic in a vacuum, but dances are partnerships. So I don't know. My wife used to watch Dancing with the Stars. And yeah, a great ballroom dancer could make a bad dancer somewhat functional, but that bad dancer still got voted off the show pretty quick. Sometimes the other party has trust issues. So there's, whether it be a bad relationship with their parents when they were kids, or they got burnt a few times by their best friend in a business deal, or they went through a divorce where something happened with their spouse. So there are times where you can be a very trustworthy person, but you might never earn the other person's trust just because of the baggage they're dealing with. So when we talk about trust, when we talk about coaching, when we talk about developing great teams, it's not as it's not as linear as, hey, I'm going to follow A, B, C, and D, and it's all going to work out. The other the other party has to do work too, and if both parties aren't willing to do the work, you're not going to have a trusting relationship.
This is true. You know, when you said that, it brought to mind like why trust is essential. And I remember when I first became a principal at a small private school, and I went on I created my own PD because PD in private school is different. So I called some other private schools around. I went and talked with them about like how did you get things started, like what is what, instruction. And then there was a guy. He was very helpful. He stopped me. He was, hey, wait a minute, man, we got to talk about culture. So he talked to me for about an hour about culture, right? And then he summarized it and he said this. He says, man, your staff. He says, first you court your staff, then you date your staff, then you get engaged to your staff, then you get married, and that's when the real work begins. He says, typically, it takes, 1 to 3 years to get engaged to your staff. And then, depending on that wedding date is really what's gonna, allow you to move that work extremely fast. But you think about the levels of trust that a marriage have to have in order for it to even the concept to even thought, or for me to say yes. And for me, what I'm learning is you can have control or you can have growth, but you're not gonna have both. And the foundation of that is trust. I need to be able to trust that when you go back to your classroom, that you're going to work on the things that we said that we were going to work on as a team. You need to be able to trust that when I come into your classroom, I'm looking for ways to help you improve and not to tear you down and say, I got you. You also need to trust that when you come to me and say a thing, and I say a thing, that those are the things that we're both going to work on, and those are things that are going to happen. You also need to trust that I'm going to be there for you. And then, I always say this to people. There are a few things in life that are important. Work as a contribution to society, um, love as a choice and the foundation of all relationships being friendship, whereas trust. But when you love something, and you talk about love in marriage, right? Sound like, what's that show from the 90s, Love and Marriage? Was it called Love and Marriage?
Married with Children.
Married with Children, Love and Marriage. That song came to mind. But when you talk about love or a marriage, love is not a feeling, it's a choice. I choose to wake up every day and be married to my wife, Cynthia. I choose to wake up every day because I love the kids in my school to create plans and to, do the data and do all the things that we really don't like to do, but I choose to because I love students and I love the teachers and I love the community. And that love is me not saying like, oh, I'm in love, but it's my choice.
Yeah, love is a choice. And there are some things that when we look at great relationships that we can mirror in our organizations to help facilitate trust. One of the best books that I read on the topic was a book by a guy named Daniel Coyle, who's also an Ohio native, called The Culture Code. So when you think about a great relationship, and we've talked about our wives, early on in that courtship, we listened. A lot of times those dates were about them, not about us, showing that we're interested in them as people, their interests, their hobbies, their motivations. So how can you take some of those things that happen organically when you're interested in a person and implement them in your organization? So there's this story in the book, The Culture Code. There was a company that was having a very hard time with retention, and they sought some outside help, and they started to tweak the way that they did their interview process. And I would say they made it more like a date. So their standard interview process was they brought the person in and they told that person the history of the company. Hey, this is why this company is fantastic. This is why it's great. This is all the money that we make. The second part of the onboarding is that they told them about a star employee. Hey, this person's a star. This person does this, this, and this is what makes them a star. And then at the close of the onboarding process, they would give them a shirt with the company name on it. So that was the standard thing. We're going to tell you about the company. We're going to tell you what it takes to be a star at our company by giving an example of a star. And we're going to give you a shirt with your name on it. So that was the standard practice. They tweaked it just a little bit. So instead of the higher ups telling the story of the company, they asked the person to tell them the story of who they are. Instead of talking about a star employee, they ask the new hire to give their list of skills that would help them get off of a deserted island. What skills would you bring to the table to help us survive on a deserted island? And then to close that onboarding session, they would give them a shirt, but the shirt, besides for the company logo, would also have the new employees logo embroidered on it. So if we take a look at how they handled that onboarding process, it went from, let me tell you all about me, to, hey, let's listen and let me hear about you. What skills do you bring to the table? Who are you as a person? And then when we give you the company shirt, it doesn't just have the company logo on it, it has your name on it. And what they found in this trial, the people that went through the second type of onboarding were much more likely to stay at the company for a longer duration of time, because it created a level of trust that the company cared about them as an individual.
And trust. I think a majority of trust is established at the beginning of every relationship. And if we don't, if we're not careful, the not trust trust is going to be established one way or another. Either I'm gonna trust you not to trust you, or I'm gonna trust you that I can trust you in those things. But whatever it is, there's gonna be a level of trust, because you have people that like I can't give that to them because I know that they won't do that work, and that's me just trusting who they are. And nothing wrong, nothing wrong with it if that's what you have to endure. Just make sure you don't go over there. I think another thing to that point is transparency. I remember when I was a high school AP, it was right in the middle of COVID. And when COVID first hit us, we all thought, I know I did. I thought we were gonna be back in school in 2 weeks tops.
Yeah, we're just going to let this wave come over us. After this wave comes over us, we'll be back.
We'll be right on back. And I remember thinking that, and that's what you want to tell people, whatever the case is. But my principal at the time, she was like, all right, y'all, here's what we're gonna do. She was like, I don't know much about what's happening right now, and neither do y'all. She said, but we're gonna sit in front of that door and we're gonna have everybody come in through that door. Every administrator is gonna be right here, and we're gonna answer any questions that they have. So I'm like, wait, time out. But we don't know anything. Yeah, okay, so we set the table up, and as people are coming in, all we knew was that people had to go clean their classrooms out, get things, and and set it up in a way that if we didn't come back, it would be set up. But if we did come back, they could easily kind of get back into it. And I remember sitting there watching her because I wasn't gonna say nothing at first because I wanted to see what she was gonna say. And she was sitting in the middle, if you can imagine, like we looked like the committee of administrators, all six of us. And people came in, they went straight to her, and they were like, "So what? What's going on?" All the panic. She was like, "I don't know." She said, "But here's what I do know: go get your classroom ready, and go make sure you take care of your family." And it was different variations of those questions. No matter what they asked, she was like, "Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know." He says, but make sure that you take care of yourself, make sure you go get your classroom ready to go. And then after about, 20 minutes, we all kind of knew the company response. But that day, when I saw how people responded to that and how encouraged they were, because they knew now anything that came out of the mouth of administration after that was going to be the truth. And we told them the truth then, and we never stopped telling them the truth throughout that entire process. So whenever we gave updates, it was always well received. And we didn't parade around like, hey, we're some know-it-alls, or we have this. And that day was the day that I developed the concept of adequate transparency. It is okay to be transparent with people and let them know, difficult truths, or things that might not that we perceive may not be received well by people. But when you tell the truth, it's always going to be received in the appropriate manner.
Yeah, that vulnerability is huge. I think maybe we need to do a podcast on how we maintain our marriages here, because another thing that we know about relationships is marriages that tend not to last, or at least not be, where both parties are content, is where there's a power imbalance, meaning that, the husband has all the power, or conversely, the wife has all the power. Those tend not to be happy marriages, and marriages that don't last. So we think about shared vulnerability. Shared vulnerability isn't that we cry on each other's shoulders. It is that we know our strengths and we know our weaknesses. There are things that you can help me with. There are things that I can help you with. So there are chains of commands in organizations, but power imbalances aren't necessarily helpful. Administration needs help from teachers. Teachers need help from administrators. If there's a balance there that they know they need help from each other, you have an effective relationship, and that effective relationship builds trust. So that's what shared vulnerability is all about.
Right. And then, leading to the next thing is consistency. And we touched on it a few different times, but just to iterate, who you are on a consistent basis and who you show up to be speaks volumes than what you say or what you can ever write. Because on a spreadsheet, it all looks fantastic. And I got this from Jesus Christ himself. Let your yeses be your yeses and your noes be your noes. You don't need to swear on anything, is what he was talking about. I had a situation to where I was talking with someone, and my favorite thing to say to people is, have I done anything, or have I ever lied to you with my actions? Right. And I'd say a different variation of that. But this particular situation had a teacher kind of like corner me on some things. And it was one of those things where, I understood that there was a balance between this person had like a personal agenda that was conducive to the success of the school. It wasn't coming from a bad place. And he wanted me to commit to a thing, but he wanted me to swear by it. He wanted me to guarantee it. And I just said, yes, like, okay, we can do that. He's, come on, can you send me an email? Can you do this? Like trying to get me to do more. I said, man, have I ever told you yes to something and didn't do it at this point in our relationship? And he looked at me, he was like, no, you know me when you say you're gonna do something, you do it. I said, because if I didn't want to do it or I wasn't gonna do it, I would look you. I said, and I have to tell people sometimes, I am not afraid to tell you no, nor do I want you to be afraid to tell me no. Because
Mm.
that gives me the understanding of like how we really should move, because beliefs are important, but that's another thing for another example. But being me being able to look him dead in his face and him understand that if I'm saying yes to this, it's yes. If I'm saying no, it's no. Or if I don't know, I'm gonna come back to you when I do know. But being consistent is so important because it impacts how we build or sometimes have to rebuild trust.
So when it comes to trust, and this is according to Coyle too, you just gave some examples by telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
Stories are a huge part of
Mm-hmm.
establishing and building trust because stories show that you're not just on the same page, you're in the same book. Your character is in the same novel. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're around somebody, this is why trust takes time. You think about your friends in high school. Sometimes if you get together with your friends in high school, what do you guys start doing? You start telling
Stories.
stories because you have a shared past. So the shared past is one part of it. So
Mm-hmm.
to be part of that story, there had to be some level of trust. So to build trust, you have to be able to share stories, but also knowing those future pages, those future chapters are going to include both of you together. So if you can tell a compelling story, if you live through COVID together, if you live through this example together where, when have I ever told you no or yes and it not ended up being, accurate, that's a story. So now you have a shared present and that we can picture you in a shared future.
Yeah. So what are, just to recap, right? Trust takes time and effort. Listen, if there's anything that I've learned in my time in being in administrating, and you can probably attest to this too, this is not a thing that is easy. It's going to require effort on everyone's part, because to connect with people, to establish trust, it's going to take energy and time. So what are some things, Zach, as we close, what are some things that people can do this week to, or this month, to start to build trust with their staff or the people that they lead? Or even if you're not in a leadership position, what are some things that you can do to build trust upwards, so that way there's more confidence in your abilities to do a thing?
Number one is make sure that your words and your actions are aligned, and start making sure you follow through. And it can be challenging, especially when you're in charge of a large organization, because there are so many stakeholders. But maybe you narrow your scope a little bit and you narrow your focus, so that way you're not like an octopus on roller skates, moving all around, but you're not accomplishing much. Set specific goals with specific people and adhere to them. I think that's one of the best ways to build trust. I think, leaning on people and asking for help, hey, I need some help with this. And if it fits into their level of expertise, you're building trust because you're showing that you need them. And if you're in a leadership position, make sure that you are very clear, as you mentioned, with your core values. Rank your priorities. Let people know, what matters to you. Very similar to me with how important it is to be on time or to start on time. Be very clear, very transparent what your priorities are, and follow through with them. And I think if you want to get a jump start on this, we all need to learn, we all need to grow, we all need to develop. I'd encourage people to pick up the book by Daniel Coyle, The Culture Code, and following those three things that he discusses. And he gives nice specific tips: building that psychological safety, shared vulnerability, and creating a high purpose environment. And some of the steps to do that are: make sure that you embrace the messenger. If somebody has to bring you negative news, instead of being closed off or confrontational, embrace the message. Sharing vulnerability, let people know how they can help you and how you can help them. And creating that high purpose environment share compelling stories about being together as a team, and this is where we are now, and this is where we want to go together. I think if you're effective with those three things, you can start establishing that culture of trust. But also know that it's not going to take place overnight.
Well, there you go. Until next time.